was thinking as I got here tonight, last time I came, I was nervous. Like, oh gosh, I haven't given a talk in a while, and can we move this thing? I'm going to end up knocking it over. Okay, and honestly, as many of you know, I'm a child psychologist, and I thought, Burl had talked to me about giving a talk on codependency, and that just felt a little bit out of my comfort zone. So I had to, read some books and do some studying, and that's hard to do when you've been out of school for a while. You get kind of lazy on that. But it was really good for me, and I think what I discovered through doing this was that there is so much about the way we relate to our children that this subject covers, and so much in myself, and I think we all, given the right situation, have the tendency to fall into a codependent relationship or enabling behavior, which we're going to talk about tonight. But my whole point, I was getting back to that really quick, I wasn't nervous at all tonight. So either that means that it's not going to go as well because I'm not nervous, or that this is a very safe group of people. And I think that's probably what it reflects more, is that you can be yourself here, you can be honest, and there was a lot of good discussion last time, and I just think that speaks to the health of this group, that people are willing to say, hey, I got a question. But if you are afraid to ask out loud, that's okay. I think the paper idea is a great plan. Well, what we're going to talk about is enabling tonight, and I certainly will admit, before we even start, that I have a tendency to do this at times. I like to rescue people occasionally, and usually feel really good about it in the moment, so we're going to talk about that. Enabling. Before we get into that, codependency was the topic that I went through last time, so we can go ahead to that next slide. Just to review, codependency is much more than enabling. Codependency is an unhealthy relationship pattern where you are engaged in a lot of different behaviors. It is a relationship addiction. Basically, you kind of lose yourself in that relationship, whatever you're doing. You're rescuing, your mind becomes obsessed with how can I prevent this happening, and I got to watch for this. And you're, like I said last time, you're riding that roller coaster with another person. And it becomes your addiction. The codependency part of it becomes your addiction. So you become obsessed with controlling that person's behavior. And just to review really quick, especially for any of you that missed it last time, on that next slide, I talk about some of the characteristics of codependency. Codependency is a reactionary process. You do something in reaction to someone else. You stop making your own goals and your own plans, and you learn to adjust your life to someone else's choices. Okay, I got to prevent them from doing this, so I'm going to do that. And then if they do that, I'm going to do this. It becomes an obsession. You either underreact, overreact, but you very rarely realize you even have a choice in how you respond to someone because you're riding that roller coaster with them. You forget that you can let go and let them ride the roller coaster, and you can step back on some more solid ground. So that's what codependency looks like. It's very, very difficult to step out of something like that on your own because it is emotionally driven. Your self-worth gets wrapped up in whether or not this person gets better, and before you know it, you don't know which way to turn. It is an incredibly cyclical pattern. You forget that you have value and you have choices and you have options, and like I said last time, you forget what your favorite color is because you're so consumed with dealing with the issues of another person. It is progressive. It is very rare that a codependent situation just stays mild over time. That's not the nature of it. The rescue attempts get bigger, the blaming, the arguing, the abuse that you incur, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, I think you can have enabling without being in a codependent relationship, but you can't have codependency without enabling. Does that make sense? So enabling is one thing that can go on in a codependent relationship. However, if you are an enabler, you need to be on guard, because this is something that puts you at risk for developing these codependent relationships. So we're going to talk about enabling, and I think it is a great topic, and I'm glad that Burl asked me to come back and talk more specifically about it, because it's really easy to see it in other people. I mean, it is crystal clear in other people. You're like, gosh, why are they doing that? That makes no sense. But it is incredibly hard to see it in yourself. It is so hard. And certainly through preparing for this talk and reading all these books and looking up things online, I began to get a little glimpse of how I might be an enabler on occasion. Just rare occasion. No. Okay, let's look at the next slide. Okay, enabling is not helping. Okay? We're taught as children, you've been a good helper. Good helping. I've probably said that to my kids hundreds of times. Thank you for being a good helper. Toddlers, we teach them that. Helping is doing something for someone, that they can't do for themselves. Another way to look at it is, or just as a gift. No strings attached. I just brought you dinner tonight because I think you're great. That's helping someone. We're taught, open the door for an elderly person. Help the elderly lady put the groceries into the house. Those are all examples of good helping behavior. Enabling is not helping. It's a confusion there. It is absolutely not helping. Enabling is offering help to someone that perpetuates rather than solves a problem. It makes it worse. And you're offering help to someone who is either capable of handling it themselves or needs to experience the consequences of not handling it themselves. And we're going to talk more in depth about that. That next slide, enabling appears like a well-meaning impulse. I think even in our own minds, you're like, gosh, I stepped in, I really came through, okay? Here is a minor example of enabling in my life. I haven't even shared this with my husband yet, but I'm not using you in any examples, just my kids tonight. So, because of the home I grew up in, my parents are here tonight, it was spotless all the time. It just gives you issues when you grow up in a perfectly spotless house. My house needs to be spotless. So I will walk through my living room and I'll see a candy wrapper, but occasionally a banana peel. I mean, this is no lie with my kids. I'll see this stuff and then I'll think, okay, well, they're out playing, whatever, and I just go through, pick it all up, and I throw it away, and I don't even mention it. Occasionally, I'll get on my little, okay, get in the house, come take the banana peel, put it in the trash. But that takes a lot of effort, and it's my issue, right? I want the clean house, so I go through, and I pick it all up, and I throw it in the trash. The next time I see the banana peel, guess what? I'm mad. Why do they not get it? You don't leave your trash in the living room. Well, I'm teaching them that a magical fairy comes by and sweeps it all away and they never have to think about it, right? I'm teaching them that. They're not learning, man, gosh, if I leave my trash in the living room, Mom is going to be all over me and stand over me while I throw it away. No, because I want it clean, I take care of it. Now, I'm getting better on that. So that's just a small example of how I'm just trying to help them. I don't want to bother them, but yet I'm not teaching them the very thing that's important to me. It's important to me that they respect our home, but I just clean it up because it's easier. So this can happen with your children. It can happen with your friends, a spouse, any relationship. It does not require that an addiction be a part of either relationship. Honestly, enabling itself can be an addiction. And I think that is something we'll talk about here in a little bit. It's more common in women. I'm sorry, ladies, but you have to watch out for this. It is certainly common in men as well. It's just a little more common in women because we're often the nurturers, looking to take care of everybody. How can I fix this? And sometimes I'm just thinking, how can I make it easy? What's the easiest solution here? I'll just throw it in the trash. Okay? It's more common in those people pleaser personalities. Anybody willing to say that they've struggled with some people pleaser personalities? Okay, if you've seen my story on Facebook, share my story, that's like the story of my life, I just want people to think that I'm nice, right? Like Burl said, we struggle with what other people think of us. And I want them to be grateful and appreciate and think that I'm a good helper. I've wanted to be a good helper since kindergarten, right? Okay, but there's a few issues that we run into. And you don't have to be a people pleaser to be an enabler. Sometimes you just get into a desperate situation where you're willing to do anything to help someone, and then you end up in an enabling situation. Last time, you all were very patient with me when I read through a couple of examples, because I know it's not always easy to be read to. But I'm going to read, these are short. These are two very different examples of being an enabler. Let me get my page turned. The first one is Sharon. Sharon is a 36-year-old woman who can and should be working to take care of her two small children, but she's not. She has her own apartment that she shares with her children and her own car. She hasn't worked a day in the last 6 years, since giving birth to her second child. Why? Because her mother and two sisters are paying all of Sharon's bills, covering bounce checks and bank fees, buying all her groceries, paying her car payment each month, and even give her spending money. Sharon is not sick. She is not mentally or physically disabled in any way, but she has found a way of avoiding the responsibilities that go with being an adult with the help of her family. Now, her family does not want to see her not have food, and her family doesn't, certainly probably not her children. They want to protect her from the consequences of her choices, so they're helping her by doing everything for her. Okay, here's another example. Paul is a 28-year-old man who, although working full-time in the construction industry and making a very good income, is still living at home with his parents. All of his free time is spent watching television or playing video games, while others in the household carry full responsibility for paying the mortgage, utilities, household chores, etc., while Paul remains stationary on the couch or in his bedroom. Paul is in good health, fully capable of providing for himself, but can't think of a valid reason why he should be living on his own. His money is spent on month-long trips out of the country, purchasing movies and video games to add to his collection, and buying new clothes. Why? Because the parents are enabling Paul by allowing him to continue to live with them, when he can and should be living on his own as an adult. That's a different example of a child that is a man, that is still living in the home. And a lot of people would cast blame, like, gosh, what is he doing? Grow up. Why would he do that? Well, he's doing that because he's being enabled to do that. It's a great option for him. It's easy for him. He doesn't feel that motivation to move forward. Okay. Enabling with addictions, and just to give you a few examples you can think of probably lots of them. Well, let's say someone gets drunk, gets really drunk, breaks a lot of things in the house, and is too hungover to go to work the next morning. Okay? Let's say, for example, this is a husband. He goes through, he gets in a rage, he breaks a lot of things, and then he has a horrible headache, doesn't want to go to work in the morning. And the wife that comes through gets the dust mop, gets the vacuum, cleans it up, calls his boss. I'm sorry, he is just really ill today. I don't know where it came from, kind of came out of nowhere. I'm sorry he won't make it in today. Please forgive his absence. Now, That's an example of enabling in an addiction situation. It seems like she's being nice, and her intentions are good. But again, it's swooping in, rescuing the person, and not allowing them to experience the consequences of their actions. The other thing, example, enabling with children. I see this all the time of, I forgot my homework at home, Mom. I forgot it. What am I going to do? Oh, honey, don't worry. I know we live 30 minutes out of town, but I'll go drive home and I'll get your homework because I don't want you to get a bad grade on that. Now that sounds completely reasonable, but yet the child learns that I got a plan B. I don't really have to make sure I have that in my bag. That's an example. There's a trend in parenting now of my kids don't do wrong. It's all the other kids. You ask any school administrator, and they will tell you that they have parents there all the time saying, well, my child was innocent, but all the other kids are doing this to them. And if any of you have children, as great as our kids are, they're not innocent. And they're usually at fault. But protecting our kids, letting your kid didn't study, high school kid. I didn't study for that test, Mom. I'm so sorry. Can I stay home today? And I'll study really hard and I'll make a really good grade on it. No. Right? But we might say, yeah, you really need your GPA up. Man, those college applications are coming soon. Okay, no big deal. Go ahead and stay home today. You're teaching them that there's a plan B. There's a backup. All right, so those are just some examples of enabling. And I think what you're going to see through this talk is that it can be everywhere. It can be in all of our relationships when we get those poor boundaries. The next part, the next slide there, talks about the cost of enabling. You are not helping when you enable someone, you are harming them. And I think that's really hard to wrap your mind around. I am not helping, I'm harming them. In fact, this really blew me away when I looked at some of the research on it. They identify enabling behavior as the cause of the more severe addictions. Because without that person swooping in and cleaning up and taking care, then the addicted person would not be able to take the next step. It wouldn't go a step farther because they would be slammed in the face with the consequences of their actions. So because they're cleaning up and they're helping and they're giving money and they're, maybe the husband goes and gets 2 jobs because the wife is spending, inordinate amounts of money. But because he's working so hard, then she can spend more. And the cycle continues. And I think if you ask any person that struggles with enabling, especially a person in a codependent or a relationship with someone with an addiction, and you say, well, do you realize that you're causing this to get worse? I think it would crush them. It would crush them because they're giving all of their energy and effort to making it better. I think it's like I said, it's really easy to see in other people. It's really hard to see in yourself. When you enable someone, you create this atmosphere of comfort and care. So you mean I can be doing this totally irresponsible, unhealthy behavior and still live in just this atmosphere of comfort? I can be cared for, because I don't want to give up my addiction, and I can still be cared for. That's what an enabler provides. You see, they get comfortable. We allow comfort. Kids are not going to strive for independence and responsibility when we allow them to be comfortable in their lack of, and we just rescue them from all the consequences. When you create that atmosphere of comfort, you remove their incentive to change. There's just no reason to change. Think about the man I mentioned earlier. He gets up, the house is cleaned, there's breakfast on the stove, he's apologetic. I'm sorry, I can't believe I did that. Did you talk to my boss? Yes, honey, took care of it. Thanks. Now, what cost did he experience to his actions? None. None. Except that he probably needs to be a little extra nice that day. He probably doesn't want to push his luck again for round 2, at least not for maybe a couple of nights or maybe a week. Okay? So, when you shield your loved ones from the consequences of your action, you prevent them from changing. Now, research indicates that the most powerful incentive to change away from any bad behavior is to feel the consequences of your actions. That's how people change. They feel the pain and the hurt and the desperation and the anxiety and the hopelessness of, what am I going to do? I can't believe I did that. When they feel nothing and someone else mops up the mess, okay, well, I'm really not that bad off. That wasn't that big of a deal. I can probably take this to the next level and it wouldn't even be a big deal. Okay, that's how it works. And the saddest thing for me in this, and we're going to talk about some of the spiritual aspects coming up, is that you deprive that person from the chance of meeting their full potential because you're cleaning up the mess. That you don't get the chance to see what are they going to do when those consequences slam into them and they have to rise above it. You don't get the chance. Now, I can't guarantee they're going to, but there's a chance there. With you cleaning up the mess, they're just going to stay right where they are in their atmosphere of comfort and care. All right, so let's look at the next slide. Are you an enabler? I'm going to kind of go through these. I'm going to pace myself and go through these because I really want you to think about each question. Do you often ignore unacceptable behavior? You ignore it because it's easier. You don't really want to face it, and if you say it out loud, then that means it's really a problem. And maybe it's just not worth the battle. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to confront them on it. Maybe you find some alcohol hidden in the cabinet. Oh well, I'm not going to say anything. Maybe they spent money that they said they wouldn't spend, or whatever the situation may be. Do you resent the responsibilities you take on? When you resent having to pick up the pieces for someone, you're probably in an enabling situation. We don't resent holding the door for someone that needs help. We don't resent, helping someone that, maybe they just had a baby and you bring them over some dinner, We resent it when it's people that are taking advantage and they know they can and they're using our help and we're giving it freely. Do you consistently put your own needs and desires aside to help others? Do you have trouble expressing your own emotions? A lot of times enablers just kind of go numb to themselves. They forget how they feel because it's not even legal. I can't even talk to you about how I feel about this because I'm so busy just trying to minimize that there's a problem and clean it up. So that's what an enabler, they just don't express their emotions. This next part about fear is something we're going to hit again. Do you ever feel fearful that not doing something will cause a blow up or disastrous consequences? You can be saying, Janessa, you can say all that all day, but you don't understand. If I don't jump in and make it right and clean it up or smooth it over or tell people, oh, it's no big deal, then this is bad. This is going to get bad if I don't keep doing my part. I agree. But bad is sometimes where things need to go. All right. Do you ever lie to cover up others' mistakes? Do you consistently assign blame for problems to the wrong people? Have you ever met anyone that is an enabler to another person, and as you talk to them, you realize that person has never done wrong? They can't do anything wrong. it's very obvious from the outside when you're looking in on it. They almost tend to have, like they put that person with an addiction or an issue up on a pedestal and blame everyone else. Well, his boss was just difficult to work for. That's why he lost his job. It was not his fault. And that they were spreading rumors that he was drinking on the job. I don't know who said that, but it is not okay to be talking about people behind their back. That's the kind of people he's around. Do you see how it works? I mean, it's so easy to just read this list and think, oh, I would never do that, or that's not me. But these are things that happen in our lives every day. Okay. Do you continue to offer help when it is never appreciated or acknowledged? You know, the way I tend to handle that is I want to keep offering it and do a little better job each time and be like, hey, did you see this? And I'm expecting them to say, wow, I have totally not appreciated the awesome impact you're making on my life, you know? Because I amped it up a little bit each time while they just ignore me, okay? But they don't. They just come to expect that. Yeah, well, that's good. I deserve it, obviously. You keep doing it, and I'm not even being nice to you. So that's just the way things should be. Okay, so maybe through these questions you're seeing that you have some tendencies towards enabling. I know that I do. I think all of us probably do, given the right situation. Let's look at the next step. So what do we do? I mean, we can talk, we can diagnose, we can, you can get out my big diagnostic manual of mental disorders, and we could probably all of us find 4 to 6 conditions that we meet criteria for, okay? But my biggest question is, what do you do? And I didn't want to come here and just give you ideas about what enabling is, but what can you do about it? The first step you have to do is you have to take responsibility for what you're doing. You are enabling people around you. It is your own addiction. I think it can absolutely be an addiction when you choose to enable because it's easier, because it cleans things up, and because people like you. Or at least maybe they're not mean to you. If you do that, they don't necessarily like you. Sometimes they become to resent you for doing it. Stop seeing ourselves as helping. It is not helpful to prevent someone from experiencing the consequences of their actions. You're stunting their growth in life. You're absolutely stunting their growth. Okay, we have to give up our false sense of control. This is the hard part with enabling, because it gives you the sense of, you know what, things are bad, but they're not that bad. I'm keeping it together. I'm keeping us afloat here, like in a spouse relationship. Well, hey, he's not going to lose his job. You got to do what you got to do, right? I called the man, told him he's sick today. That is a false sense of control, that you are controlling the other person. And you may be controlling the situation in the short term, but long term it's headed downhill very fast. But that's the payoff. That's why we enable. Because we want to have a feeling that we're controlling the situation in some way to be helpful. You know, when I clean up my kids' trash, which is horrible that they leave banana peels, isn't it? Are you guys with me? Come on. Okay. Like, I'm glad they're eating healthy snacks, but, on my couch, that's cloth? Okay. So when I clean those things up, I have a sense of control of, well, you know what, they're doing that, but I can just make it right. I can make it right. I can easily pick this up and I don't have to think about it anymore. That's my payoff. My payoff is I don't have to deal with it. Now, short term, my living room doesn't look like a trash barrel. I feel good about that. I can walk in, I can breathe, I can look at my couch without trash and feel good. Long term, I'm teaching my kids that they don't have to take responsibility for their trash. Just throw it everywhere. Mom will clean it up, and life is good. So when they're outside of my home and they go to a friend's house, oh gosh, would you not just die? And they throw their banana peel on someone else's couch, and that mom says, "Excuse me, have I prepared my children for that?" No, I've set them up for failure because I'm not teaching them that that's not okay. And really just me griping at them later, like, my word, guys, come on, let's pick your banana peels up, blah, blah, blah. Can they tune that out pretty easy? Oh, yeah. I'm using the banana peels as a silly example to think about all the ways that we enable our kids, our loved ones, that doesn't work outside of our home. They can't get away with that outside of our home. So, bear with me on my silly example, but that is a true story about the banana peel. Okay, emotional aspects of enabling. This fear issue is the biggest barrier to letting go of this. Because here's what happens. If I don't step in, I'm so afraid what's going to happen to that person. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's not going to be good. Think about the teenager. I didn't study for my test. I needed the day off, Mom. I can't believe I forgot. It's a huge final. Okay. You know, I was one of those overachievers in school, and it's really important to me that my kids do good in school because who does that reflect on? That reflects on me. And I'm really afraid of what's going to happen when they go in there and bomb that test. You know, they might have to repeat this course. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to give in to my fear. And I'm going to say, all right, just this one time, you know, that's not a good practice, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So that ties into fear, and it ties into pride. We can't forget pride. Pride is sneaky, especially with us that are such good helpers. And we want to put everyone else first. But here's the thing. The people in our life that we're helping, we tie our self-worth directly to whether or not they make good choices. And it is an issue of pride, and it reflects on me. Oh, I heard your husband lost his job. What happened? Well, you know, his boss was really hard to work for. Do you see how that works? We have that tendency we want to defend. Because maybe I didn't call in for him. Maybe I left the mess. And then I have to face the consequences alongside him of his actions. That's hard. That's so easy to just say in a talk, you know. I can say whatever. You know, maybe you have a spouse that has a pornography addiction, okay? And instead, when you see it pop up on the computer, you just minimize it and, ooh, gosh, that was unfortunate. I wish that wouldn't have come across the screen. Okay. Now, that not addressing it because of the fear of what could that mean? If that's really a problem, then what does that mean for our marriage? And that's a pride thing too. Well, that's embarrassing to think that, you know, maybe they want to look at that and they don't want to look at me. That's embarrassing. So there's a pride issue component, and then self-worth. Wow, what does that mean about me if this is where we are? Because you have to face it. You can't set a boundary with someone if you're living in denial. You can't. I mean, you can pretend, but it's not going to be genuine. So you have to be willing to face the fact that that person could be out of a job, out of money, I mean, potentially on the street facing the consequences of their actions. That's pretty rough. But the truth of the matter is those consequences are then motivating for them to change. Continuing to protect them and protect them and protect them, like I said, stunts their growth. So how do you deal with that emotion and really do something about this if you find yourself in an enabling position? The first thing you have to do is detach from the situation. And this was also part of the codependency talk. A little difference here. Allow the consequences to hit. You know, I'm real good about telling my kids, hey, if you don't do this, then you're going to lose this you're going to have no technology today. I have a hard time pulling the trigger on that. It's like, okay, I'm going to give you one more chance. And if you do it this time, I'm really serious. You're really going to lose that privilege. And they know that. They read me, and I'm a child psychologist. Do you guys remember that? Yeah, okay. But you know what I don't want? I don't want them to be sad. And I don't want them to be upset. And I want to protect them from learning everything the hard way. Gosh, I just give them one more opportunity. Allowing the consequences to hit. Don't give them the cash. Don't go get them and give them a ride. Let them struggle for a ride. Let them struggle. What am I going to do? Where is my next meal going to come from? Because that struggle can empower change. Say no in the face of angry, abusive, and manipulative reactions. It is not easy. It's not as if you can come to a talk on enabling and go home and be like, okay, I learned something tonight, and here's my boundary, and I just wanted to let you know. This is how things are going to be. Because when you change the dynamics of that relationship, you better expect anger. And there is fallout. And there is, more rage and manipulation than you thought possible sometimes. Because you're not doing your part. You're supposed to do your part. And when you step away from that, things can get volatile. Don't start getting drawn into the argument and crying and begging them to change, and you've got to change. You've just got to step away. Set the boundary, step away. And deal with the fear of doing nothing. We have short-term consequences or long-term misery. So that's how the detachment part works. Let's look at the next. Can't miss this. You know what? When you decide that you're no longer going to enable someone, you have to deal with the fact that they might never change. And that is really scary. Really scary. Because for now, I have this false sense of control, that I'm really doing something to help. But remember what the research says, that what you're doing is actually causing the addiction to get worse. That's what's happening. So you have to deal with it. You know what? I can't fix this person, and I want them to have a chance to change, but they might not ever. And that's hard. Separating yourself from your habit of enabling. That's that next slide. I think it's really easy to say, we have to set boundaries. We throw that word around a lot. Well, what is a boundary? I thought, we need some specific examples. What do you mean by a boundary? I have a whole book on boundaries here that I recommend. For example, I will not discuss that with you. Okay, that's setting a boundary. Maybe they want to talk about how they need this, or they want to spend money on this, and they want to spend, and I'm going to have to go get a loan. I will not discuss that with you. That's a boundary. I don't approve of that behavior. I'm not going to discuss it with you. Because what you would normally say is, we can't do that. Please don't do that. We really have to look at our money, and I don't know what we're going to do, and we're going to have to go get a loan. You would try to talk them out of it. Okay? Geographical distance. Sometimes a separation is necessary. And with friends, this is a whole lot easier than with family. But I can't come visit for a while. I told you at the last talk about my friend in an abusive relationship who would call me and call me at 6:30 a.m., 7 a.m., just day after day after day. And I realized that I needed a break. Because she was not changing. I was giving her professional level counseling, the best I had, everything I had, because I wanted her out. And she just stayed there. And I felt resentful because I was doing everything I could to help, and I just had to say, I love you, but I can't talk about that. I can't talk about it. Time. I need some time away. With your kids, I'll check back with you in 30 minutes to see if you've done this. But hovering over them and coaching them and do this and do that, do this and that, you're just they're not getting anything done independently. You have to step away, set the boundary. Emotional distance, especially in relationships where there's been just a huge break in trust, whether being unfaithful or with an addiction. I need some time to trust you again. I just need some time. It's okay to set that boundary. The next step, learning to be healthy. We've talked about detaching your self-esteem from your ability to rescue someone. Set healthy boundaries. Stop protecting people from their own emotions. When you're not honest and you don't say, you know what, I'm really hurting right now and I can't talk to you about that, then you're just protecting them from experiencing any kind of negative feeling. And that's what a lot of enabling is. Like I said with my kids, I don't really want to set that boundary because then I know they're going to whine, they're going to be all upset, and I'm going to have to deal with it. I don't want them to feel that way. So I protect them from that experience. We do that with adults. Someone asks me, will you do this for me? Sure. I have unlimited time, and I would love to help you. No, I'm thinking in my head, no, I can't do that for you, but I don't want them to feel sad. I don't want them to feel disappointed. But what am I enabling them to do? Hey, you can ask her anytime. That woman has no idea how to say no, okay? So that's what that looks like. That's how it plays out. God created us in his image, and he can help that person cope with disappointment. It's okay. Emotions are uncomfortable. They're not dangerous. They're not dangerous. Emotions in and of themselves. Get honest with your feelings. Accept nothing but honesty from others. Stop overlooking things. Stop pretending you didn't see that. Stop just ignoring things out of sheer denial. That is not helpful. Make decisions based on long-term outcomes, break your routines, and develop new friends. Sometimes a new friendship can give you a whole new perspective on how you've been in an unhealthy relationship. The next slide talks about some spiritual considerations. I don't think you can talk on enabling without talking about the power of God. And Brian preached on this a couple of weeks ago. Are you a mailman or an architect? And how many of you guys heard that sermon? A few of you? Okay. And he talked about his mail lady. She just delivers the mail. She comes by, she puts the message in the mailbox, and she doesn't go home and lose sleep at night over whether you read that mail or paid that bill or, handled your mail in an appropriate way. No. All she did was put the mail in the box. She gave you the message. The architect is someone that sees the whole project from start to finish, has a vision, has, every intricate detail of a building they're in charge of. Well, an enabler assumes the position of an architect over someone else's life. They assume that they're God over it. Well, I have to do this and this and this because I know we're going to get better. It's going to get better if I do my part. Like with my friend. If I give her all the best professional counseling advice that I can come up with, then she's really going to step away from an abusive situation. It's going to work. I can see her life. I can see her happy and smiling and her kids smiling. I can see it all coming together, and I'm playing an integral role in it. No. I was delivering the mail, and she was throwing it out. And I was the one hurting over the situation. So, we are just the mailman, the mail lady. You can only give a message. You can give encouragement. You can give a word from the Lord to someone, but you can't architect their life. You can't design it. You can't control it. I love Oswald Chambers, and I mentioned this last time, and whatever those styles of worship were that Brian talked about that night when he mentioned Oswald Chambers, that's totally me. Brenda, he mentioned you. We are like on the same plane on that. So I love Oswald Chambers. He was a writer, a theologian in the early 1900s. He died very early, like in his early 40s from appendicitis. But he has some awesome truth in this book right here, My Utmost for His Highest. And he has a devotion in here that uses the book of John, which I've actually been reading through lately. But in John, Peter and Jesus are talking, and they're cooking breakfast on the beach. And he says, Peter, do you love me? And, Peter's like, of course, I love you, I love you. And he says, Peter, do you love me? Yes, I love you. Peter, do you love me? By that time, Peter's feeling a little irritated, like, why do you have to ask me that 3 times? And there's a lot of speculation on why he asked him 3 times. Peter had denied Christ 3 times, so perhaps it was to show him that level of how much he had been forgiven. But Peter, don't you love, he's like the loudmouth of the Bible. If you read in the Gospels, Peter just ends up saying things that we're all thinking that as people pleasers would never say, but we're so glad someone said. That's kind of how it works out. Okay, so Peter, when Peter saw him, he said, when Peter looked at the Apostle John, and he said to him, well, Lord, what about this man? Jesus said to him, if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? Follow me. So Jesus said, don't you sit and worry about what's going to happen to John. Peter, you focus on you. And that's a message straight from the mouth of Christ in the Bible. It is hard enough to follow Christ one-on-one with him. We are certainly not going to be successful at being responsible for another person and leading them on the right path. Only Christ can do that. I want to read you the words of Oswald Chambers because I want to finish with this. I love the way he puts this. His title is, What is that to thee? Lord, what shall this man do? What is that to thee? Follow thou me. And that's the old King James version of this verse I just quoted to you. It says, one of our severest lessons comes from the stubborn refusal to see that we must not interfere in other people's lives. It takes a long time to realize the danger of being an amateur providence, that is, interfering with God's order for others. You see a certain person suffering and you say, he shall not suffer, and I will see that he does not. You put your hand straight in front of God's permissive will to prevent it. And God says, what is that to thee? If there is stagnation spiritually, never allow it to go on, but get into God's presence and find out the reason for it. Possibly you will find it is because you have been interfering in the life of another, proposing things you had no right to propose, advising when you had no right to advise. The saddest part to me about enabling is that you prevent the hand of God in someone's life. You prevent them from coming to a place of repentance. You prevent them from getting on their knees and having nowhere else to turn because they can always turn to you. That's the scariest part about enabling. We have to let people fall before the Lord and have nowhere else to turn. And, I just think it's interesting. People never change. Times change, but the issues of people do not change. This was written in the early 1900s, and people were struggling with that then. It's not like we finally figured out that this is something, and it now bothers us. This is a long-term problem in man. Peter said it in the Bible. Well, what about him? What's going to happen to him? I think our challenge here is to put your eyes on God and stop trying to play God in the lives of other people. You're afraid of what's going to happen when you step back. That's scary. But ultimately, he's in charge anyway. So, I think that's all I have. I guess we can do some questions. I have no idea how long that was, so might be time to go. I don't know.
Do we have some questions you want to pass some of those down, or maybe you just want to ask it?
And if no one has a question, I won't take it personally. I'll just figure I covered everything thoroughly. And if it's too hard, I'll just recommend a good book for you. Okay, should I start? All right. How do you stop enabling an enabler? Oh, my word. Well, I guess you take less emphasis on what they're doing and put emphasis on what you're doing. Because, they may continue to enable and you can't necessarily control that. Gosh, that thing gets me every time. But you can stop what you're doing. You can realize that you are part of a chain reaction that just keeps going and going. When you enable them, then now they have the resources to enable another person, and it just kind of continues. So, focusing on yourself and your own crossing of the boundaries. Is there any more? Okay. This is a tough one. How would you address a step-parent who is verbally abusing your child? Oh, that's hard. This comes down to, I think the easy answer is just that you minimize what this person said. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. I'm sorry they said that, but you know they don't feel that way, and you know how much we love you, and just try to ignore. They're just having a tough day. What is all of that? That's enabling. That's smoothing it over with the child. I think that is a time abuse is real. Verbal abuse changes the way kids believe about themselves. The negative is 10 times more powerful than the positive. So my thought is, you set a boundary. It is not okay to speak that way to this child. When you choose to speak this way, we choose to leave the home for a few hours because you need to calm down, and it is unacceptable. If that does not work and you continue in this pattern, we may have to choose to live somewhere else while you get some counseling, because we cannot afford for this to continue. It is wrong. Now, there's all kinds of financial and practical reasons why that's really hard to do, but it's much harder to undo the effects of abuse. Much, much harder to undo those effects. So, is there any other? Yes. Here's what I've found. Remember the short term versus the long term. What I have found is over time, children gravitate towards what's healthy. Even if they can't stand the rules at mom's house because, I have to be in at 10 and I have to turn in my phone and blah, blah, blah. Even though, I think first of all, you probably need a set visitation schedule that isn't optional. And that works best when both parties are in agreement. That is not a perfect world. I totally get that. But even so, you have to show that these things are important. These behaviors, this character I'm trying to develop in you is important, and I'm going to set these boundaries, even if you choose not to stay. Even if you choose that. I want you to know I love you, and you explain why you're doing it. But you have to do that. And over time, I've seen it so many times, the kids will learn to gravitate towards what's healthy. Because doing whatever I want to do is really kind of scary. I like it, and I may make some really bad mistakes, that's what's scary. But over time, they come back, is what we see. And again, so much easier to see enabling in your spouse than in yourself. That's absolutely true. Like you were saying, that they both have that step-parent relationship. like an anger issue and not handling yourself well. But the thing that will motivate that person who's kind of given into that anger and that impulsive emotion is to realize, okay, they're going to step away from me if I don't get this under control. And that's something we can certainly commit to prayer, because the more frustrating and long-standing a difficult situation is, the more the anger just grows. I mean, we all have a limited amount of patience. And so the frustration starts to spill out. And I'll tell you this, when you are frustrated and you're angry in a situation, focusing in on your boundary gives you a sense of control that is real. Okay, if you choose to speak to me that way, here is your consequence. And if you focus on that other than just trying to talk them down or let's all get along, then your anger level stays down, usually. So, what do you do when one parent is an enabler and the other is not? That's kind of similar to what we were talking about. I guess it depends on if you're the enabler or not, depending on who asked the question. I think as an enabler, which I tend to be a little bit more, my husband is not. Well, he can be on occasion. I won't speak for him. But it's being willing, being humble. I need to be held accountable to that. You know, if you see me giving in, if you see the kids talking me out of my consequences because I love them so much, you need to hold me accountable to that. And that takes a lot of humility, because here I am being the one that's so helpful, and I feel like everyone should just be, you know, giving me hugs and thanking me for all the good works that I do. So, let's see. And I should mention that we can be an enabler to any situation. Rebellious kids, even a chronic health issue. You know, I think about those situations with like a morbidly obese person. You know, you see that on the news sometimes, like 700 pounds or something like that. And it's real easy to, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Well, how did they maintain a weight of 700 pounds? How do you do that? You do that by someone bringing you the food. Well, if that's not something you struggle with, you think, well, why would someone do that? That's weird. Why would you do that if you know it's hurting them? Well, why would you give someone cash every Friday when they call and they're in a desperate situation? That's just enabling them to feed their addiction. Well, I just felt bad for them. You see, it's just, sometimes it's really easy to see. How do you let someone know they are enabling another person? Whoa. That is, man, I can't ask who, but you guys are stumping me tonight. That wasn't on the PowerPoint. Okay, how do you let someone know? Oh, I would say you really need to bathe that situation in prayer, and you need to be led by the Spirit of God to confront someone on that. And you do it in love, because coming at them and saying, well, what do you think you're doing? Why are you doing this? Why are you allowing this to go on? Why are you cleaning that mess up? Why are you making that call? They're only going to defend the person they're enabling. So show love, compassion, concern, and be led in the Spirit. Only the Spirit of God can change hearts. We can't. We can't as humans. Okay. A codependency person of my son, enabling. I'm not really sure what this one means. Codependency.
I think codependent my son that I need to stop. He's at an age where he depends on me to do everything. And I know he's more than a child, but I need to let him do something.
Okay. And you know, I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes people with disabilities, it's really hard to draw the line. I specialize in autism, and I work with autism every day. And the biggest challenge for parents is, well, I don't know what to get onto them for, and I don't know what they can do on their own. And I always say, hold the bar high. Hold it high. Give them a chance to be successful. And hey, if you need to adjust it down just a little bit, it's better to miss high than to keep it on the floor. Because if you keep it on the floor, their development's going to stay on the floor. With your son, I would start out small. Giving him some small tasks to learn, and then what's really cool is once they do some things independently, you see this light come on, like, hey, I did that. That is awesome, and they feel proud, and then it kind of spurs on more development. But as long as we rescue, you have to be willing to let them fail too. And that is the hardest thing, I think, sometimes for a parent, is to watch your child trip, fall, and fail. So, all right, is there any other questions? Okay. So his question was, if someone is enabling you and you want to let them off the hook. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You know, I think it would go the same way of setting boundaries with that person. First of all, you want to be very grateful because, you know, it's hard work enabling someone. And to say, you have been very loving and very kind, and I appreciate this, but it's creating kind of an unhealthy balance in our relationship, and I want to do more of this. And what you'll have to watch for is helping that person find another source of value, because that becomes their value, is that they're picking up all the pieces and doing everything and, you know, working themselves into a frenzy trying to make everything perfect. And then when you say you don't have to do that, well, what do I do? You know, so helping them find value, value in resting, value in taking some time for themselves, value in just developing their own hobbies or interests while you say, I've got this. I want to take this burden off of you. You've been loving and helpful. And I would honestly say, for a true enabler, that's what they really want. That's their goal. But it doesn't come through enabling someone. Does that make sense? It's real easy to just say what to do, but a hard thing to live it out. So, anybody else?
What if you just go out just looking for somebody to enable? Just everybody or anybody.
So you're kind of shopping for someone to help type thing, like looking around any situation you fall into? Okay. Well, I would say that that is a pattern that is long-standing and learned and gives you a sense of value in helping other people. And it's just a matter of finding those situations where you're truly helping and not enabling them to stay where they are. Because it's good to be helpful. I mean, the Bible talks about, you know, helping others is a good thing. But, you know, really being careful and guarded in those relationships of who really needs me to help. And also spirit-led, and not just, well, you know, I can totally take over your life and make it great. You know, because that's sometimes what we think we can do, you know.
Yes, I do. I don't like to see them do with that.
Yeah.
So I just run out and get it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even have to speak up. If they need that, I'm going to go get it.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes the Spirit of God leads us to meet a need for someone, and that's okay.
Well, I know, but this is grandchildren that you just lavish everything out on.
Right.
Or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And they need to learn that you can't always get that at a moment's notice, right? Because that's a hard thing. When they get out in the real world, people don't hand out gifts on a tray, right? Okay.